Here we are closing out our first week in August, and we're closing it out with a maintenance day. Crew just left, and so what we had to do is SMUD, because they didn't understand what the gateway was, how it worked, all of that, we wound up having to install yet another panel so that we could tie loads in there instead of doing what everyone else does, and that is bringing the battery load into the sub panel and then having the utility side deal with the utility on their end. Well, they decided that they wanted to have the batteries tied in separately. The installers are referring to this as the wall of redundancy. And again, a lot of it, all of it really is either SMUD does not understand what the Tesla gateway is or how it operates, and it seems like they, at this point, don't really want to. Again, it's to their benefit, I suppose, to slow things down. I'm not really sure, but that's where we're at. And so we'll head back over to the studio and we can discuss this in a little more detail and look also at the rest of the week. Welcome back to the studio as we get back into the swing of things here following our trip. So we had an interesting first week in August, and as with previous months, we look at these kind of general themes that crop up, whether it's power exchange or charging management, that kind of thing. This month's theme seems to be thermal management. And as you'll see as we get into this, managing the heat is a major issue. As the temperatures rise up, we get into that situation where the panel efficiency decreases and the home's reliance on AC goes way up, especially in the evening when we get into those situations where we have still air. And as August gets us into this full furnace of summer here in Sacramento, we can start to examine some of the issues that faces those that have systems in more southern or desert climates, like Arizona, Nevada, New Mexico, parts of Texas, and even Utah. So if you wind up being in one of those environments, you might find August here quite helpful to you, because we will be experiencing situations that maybe are more similar to what you guys see on a more regular basis. So maybe you'll find some of this to be helpful. But what we're seeing here is that the sizing of systems that are designed to be exposed to environments with greater heat probably also need to be built in conjunction with things like efficient cooling methods for the home, and possibly even additional capacity to make up for that additional usage. And so that, again, might be more applicable to people in warmer climates, so they might actually find what we're going through here to be pretty useful. So with that, let's go ahead and pull up the first. And one of the things we discussed in last month's closeout was the direct correlation between the temperature and the solar output and the home usage. And from what we can see here, the day was in the high 80s to low 90s. A decent production, only about 3% below normal or so. Moderate driving as well. We can see that 15 kilowatt hours was sent to the car to replenish what was used for the day. It's basically that 53% was where we ended for the total solar day. 57.8 kilowatt hours of production there. And we go to the notes. Basically just that, replenishing the miles, adding a few, not much else to really add here on this one. Let you look at that for just a second. 15 kilowatt hours to the car. And then on the second, had some interesting stuff going on here. It was an interesting day, but really for kind of an unnatural reason. So you'll remember Tomas's system. Well, Tomas was having some difficulty with his system as far as what the app was telling him, and I tried to help him out by replicating that on my system by running a small test and then seeing if my app reported the same thing as his did. And the issue that then cropped up was an old problem that you'll remember from several months ago that kind of came back to bite me when I made the change through the app. But what happens sometimes is that the app simply just refuses to return to its original setting in a timely manner. And usually it's in that kind of 15 to 20 minute range, but it can be quite longer, and I've actually had it before also where it was in excess of 2 hours. Well, man, 2 hours is coming up, and I got pissed off and decided, no, I'm not going to keep doing this. I have no idea when it would return to normal operation. So I put it into zombie apocalypse mode. So decent production for the day, 55.5 kilowatt hours, and only slightly elevated home use because of the AC going on there. And the notes, again, this is what I said here. After taking 5 kilowatt hours from the grid, I finally got pissed off enough that I just turned it off, and so then 15 kilowatts was put to the car to replenish the miles used for that day and add a few. Look at that for a second. And then on the 3rd, more fun with zombie apocalypse mode. So the reason here, so the system was left on zombie apocalypse mode overnight, and 12 kilowatts was put to the vehicle for a round trip to the Bay Area. And so I'll just talk about that for just a second. This was actually the first time that I was concerned that I might not be able to make it back, because that 12 kilowatts was really depleting the system down, and so the system was taken down to 10 kilowatt hours. System was taken down to 10% in the hopes that it would regain enough to make it to 30% charge in the system before total solar day, and it did. But this was just one of those weird edge cases that it's going to be impossible for any smart system to kind of predict this type of a thing, because there's just too many variables. Now I came close, but truth be told, this was just more blind luck than intent. But I did manage to peak out at 32% by the end of total solar day. But as I said before, you'll notice here that I did actually take nearly 2 kilowatt hours from the grid again, and I actually turned on grid power, fully expecting it to be back on self-power and perfectly normal. But it was still not responding. The thing was still stuck in its previous mode, and so I went into the app and altered it, and went from self-powered mode back to I think it was an advanced mode setting, and then went back into self-powered mode and adjusted the percentage, and then eventually it did wind up returning back to normal. But the reason that a zombie apocalypse mode appears here again was that I had turned on to grid power briefly, and the car was charging again. I had expected that it would then return to normal mode. It still wasn't, and so then I immediately turned the grid back off, and you can see that here as I did that. But anyway, so tried to keep what I used to a minimum while I was charging the car to keep that clean. And here's the notes. Again, basically what I just said. 12 kilowatt hours to the car. Managed to get it to 230 miles, and I knew this was going to be really cutting it close going there and back, but because I was passing a couple of superchargers on my way home, it was no big deal. And so I if I had to slip into one for just a real quick bump charge, then I'd just do that. But So then on the 4th, we had another high heat day. Scorcher. As you can see, we had some reduced production because of the heat and a slightly elevated consumption for the day, 43.5 kilowatt hours there. And I had to put some charge to the car after returning home. But I did make it back by the skin of my teeth. I saw that I was going to make it back with under 5% charge, but then, I also, as I was coming home, I also knew that I was going to be passing a couple of level 2 chargers. And so if I needed to, I could use that option, pull in and charge a little bit there to make it home if I was going to fall short. So, and then the notes. Like I show here, I pulled in with some 3 to 4% remaining. Admittedly, I drove conservatively those last few miles so that I could make it. I don't like altering my normal patterns too much because I don't want people to feel that I'm trying to game the system here. I want to make sure that this is as true to life as possible. But I think you'll let me slide on this one. And so the 5th. Kind of an overcast day here, mild temperatures because of the slightly cloudy weather, and we had a nice delta breeze in the evening, and so that you can capitalize on that to keep the home use fairly low. And that said, you'll note that we started again at 0% for the morning, and we wound up taking 3.2 kilowatts from the grid. This was my bad from the previous day. I wound up I'd drawn the system down to 20% instead of the 30% that I usually do, and I underestimated a bit how much the AC was going to use on the previous day, and it's not the easiest thing to predict. One can shut off the AC, but again, back to what I was saying about the car, I don't feel that that's a fair test, since I'm not expecting any one of you would have done that just to keep from drawing a little power from the grid, and so we did not do that either. And so totally my bad on this one. Not much went to the car, but you put a little bit to the car and boom, too much, and then you run out of charge at 2 in the morning. And so the notes, like I said, slightly too much power to the car. We would have made it if I hadn't put so much to the car, but I was going to drive the car. So basically that, you're replacing gasoline with the charge to the car, and so it's more bang for your buck to do that. And then here we have the 6th, and overcast again, slight reduction in production because of that, but also the temperature kind of tossed us another curveball, and that curveball is what we discussed before: still air. In the evening, everything was just absolutely dead. There was no way to open the windows to kind of generate any kind of cooling, and so the evening was all AC. That was everything that happened there. 8 kilowatt hours to the car, and that became an issue, as you'll see on the 7th. But the elevated home use, 49.5 kilowatt hours. That represents all that additional AC load. It's just crazy. Anyway, so the notes for the day, basically, just what I said, was that still air in the evening was just an absolute killer. Put some miles into the car, but not much, and then that turned out to be a slight issue because of where we wind up starting off the next day. And so then it brings us to the 7th. Now on the 7th, you'll notice here we have another maintenance day. And so we made it through the evening with 7% to spare, but I needed to use the car a little bit, and then, like a ding-dong, I went ahead and depleted the system to 0. Well, I absolutely forgot that we had this as a maintenance day today, and so that resulted in not having power to do some testing. So you'll notice here again, like I said, it's a maintenance day, and so the maintenance here, the system was going to have to undergo one last modification, and so hopefully this is the last change that SMUD will be demanding. And in retrospect, I should have left that 7% on the system so that we could more easily test it after the work was done, but it turned out fine. But unfortunately, this also meant that I lost nearly an entire day's production, and that left the system with only 18.8 kilowatt hours of production, and total solar day was, what do we get here? Total solar day percentage was a whopping 8%. So that obviously was not going to get us very far into the evening. It managed to get us past 10 o'clock at night, and so that was helpful. But yeah, I'll put up a couple of photos here showing what the modifications were. The installers, SunWorks, the gang started to refer to this as the wall of redundancy. And so SMUD, this is the result of them flat out insisting on moving the battery supply from the sub-breaker panel where it belonged to a secondary, well, tertiary feed panel. And this is the result of them totally not understanding what the Tesla Gateway even does. And that's just really unfortunate. So this move, was one of the things that was necessary for us to get final approval on the system so that we can get our rebate. So they were holding that over our heads, so that we just went ahead and did it. And so then the other alteration that I'll pull up here was a demand that SMUD made that was a little bit easier to understand. Obviously, they want to make sure that if any firefighters are going to be showing up, they don't want them to be harmed by any battery supply voltage that might come out. And so in the case of an emergency, we installed this kill switch off of the side. So that also meant that I had to install an alarm and a security camera, but that's something for another video. But here's the notes. Again, basically just what I said. Hopefully this puts to bed any further modifications. Did that 5 kilowatt hours to the car in the morning that I shouldn't have put on there, and then just the basic vehicle information. And then here finally is the 8th to close out the week. As I said previously, because we'd lost a day's worth of production, we were only able to run until just past 10 p.m. the previous evening before grid power kicked in. And so then the usage that you see here is split between the 7th and the 8th. We wound up using 7.9 kilowatt hours from midnight till around 8 a.m. when the system production matched what our home load was. And here we have the notes. And 20 kilowatt hours to the car. The system managed to recover to 21% to try and get us through the evening while still supporting some driving that day. And that brings this first week of August to a close. Quite an eventful week all in all, and if I'm honest, it didn't leave us in the best position as we're entering August and likely several more days of these elevated temperatures, but we'll have to see how we do. So until next time, thanks for joining us, and as always, I wish you the best with your own systems. And if you have any questions regarding anything that you've seen here, please feel free to list those questions down in the comment section, and well, see you all again soon.